the kind of the next question, and these next two kind of tied together, maybe next three of them. I don't. It takes the self awareness again as a coach. Like these are things I think a lot of times in youth hockey, particularly, the coaches don't ask. So one would be, who are you coaching? And the second would be, what do you want to accomplish with this particular group? Those are good questions to understand going in. And then the third, kind of branching off of those two, is what where's the limit of your knowledge as the coach? So what do you know right now? What do you need to learn in order to be an appropriate coach for this team at this age or whatever? So I think it's important to dissect some of that stuff as the coach before you go into a situation. And the one example I've used before is he was it's so funny. So the best coach I ever had to this point, well, not that I have coaches in other areas now, but in hockey, was Billy Bowler. He was the best coach I ever had, and he was phenomenal. Next after him was my U10 coach. And it's not because he was really great at hockey, it's because he was a great person, and he tried to do that motivating, make us better people.
Yeah. Appropriate.
And to his credit, when I don't remember if it was 10, 11 or whatever, somewhere around there, he coached us for like our first year of AAA or something like that. And then he stopped coaching us because he said, I cannot offer you guys anything anymore. Like, I can't help you with hockey anymore. I don't know enough. I vividly remember that as a little kid. I remember that being his reason why he stopped. And whether it was or it wasn't, like, that's what he said, at least. And that speaks to him, the character of him as a person, and why I would think of him as being a great coach. You can imagine the type of guy that would say, I'd love to keep coaching you guys, but I don't feel I can help you anymore beyond just, the have fun, good guy stuff. So he steps down, and the void was filled with like worse and worse coaches year after year. Like if he would have stayed, it would have been the best coach we would have had of the coaches we had up until I had Billy or whatever. Anyways, my point being, this guy knew where he was done. Like, he knew where it's no longer appropriate for me to be the guy that helps. And I think a lot of coaches, especially in smaller centers where there's not maybe as much money flying around to attract, experienced coaches that are really qualified, it's real easy to just, step in and have your arms crossed guy, and I'm the coach that knows everything now. And we talk to coaches around here all the time from like AA, AAA levels, where they come in and have conversations with us, and they're just like Joe Coach now. And they actually don't know anything, and they don't know how to help their guys, and they don't study, and they don't try to learn. And obviously younger, less of that is necessary. But as kids are, 14, 15, 16, it's like you don't know any systems. You don't know how to teach them positional play. You don't even have a team philosophy. You don't know roles for your guys. Like, these are things that should start to come into play. And a lot of them just don't have it. So I think those three questions, it's like, who you're coaching and what do you want to accomplish? And then tied in with that is just like, what about the limits on your knowledge? So maybe just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the big one is, who am I coaching? Like, that's a great question that we came up with, because, I mean, if you're NHL coach Bruce Cassidy just won a Stanley Cup and you're coaching a Pee-wee team, it's a different level, different type of player. So who am I coaching? That's it. Now it's a development. It's all about teaching them how to have fun. So who am I coaching? So if you're coaching like a low level or a very young group of kids, then it has to be appropriate to that. Like, the X's and O's aren't the most important thing. And then even like, so let's just take an age of 12-year-old kid, or 10, 12, let's say 12-year-old kid. So at 12 years old, there's different levels of who am I coaching. You've got both from individuals and from a team standpoint. So who am I coaching at 12 years old? And if it's a AAA team, okay, that's one thing. But then what level of AAA is it? Like, who AAA? So if you're coaching a small center where there's, maybe 30 guys that try out, and really 10 of them could play AAA somewhere else, that's still different than coaching the Toronto Marlies Pee-wee team, or U13 team, or U12 team, whatever it is. And that's different. So like, a really good team, team from, let's say, Toronto Marlies, you're probably going to be able to and should implement more advanced systems or drills and teaching philosophies, because I'm going to just say that because of the talent level and the seriousness of that organization, that's what's expected. So that would make sense. But then don't forget that they are 12, because they like, who am I teaching? You're still teaching 12-year-olds. So there has to be an element of fun, has to be an element of teaching. There has to be an element of seriousness, but and development. And then, so if you take that same AAA team at, let's say, use Chatham, Ontario, or Sudbury, Ontario, where like I said, you might get 30 guys try out, and you're hoping to field a decent team. Well, that's a different AAA level. Now you still want to teach like some sort of system so that you can compete, but your development is a whole different development model, and what comes easier to maybe 15 kids from the Toronto market, AAA market, it might not come as easy to a small town where you get 30 kids. So that teaching has to be a little bit different. So who am I teaching? As serious as a kid wants to be, sometimes you're limited on the philosophy or the systems that you can use. So, for example, if you're coaching a 12-year-old AAA team from Toronto, the Toronto Marlies, let's say, you can do some pretty advanced stuff because the skill level is going to be good, right? You can play fast, you can play riskier or whatever. Whereas if you want to give a chance to a small town, Sudbury, Chatham, like whatever, something like that, then you're probably, unless you've got some just absolute studs on your team, you're probably going to have to give them a chance against the big teams. You're going to probably have to play more defensive style, and you can build skill within that. And then it's probably more of an encouraging thing, or like teaching them to be underdogs and fighting through things. Like, it is what it is. And then as you go to maybe a lesser level, let's say double A, and this is no slight on those kids, but this is just from my experience. When you get kids that aren't playing, like trying to get to that next level or have the ability to get that next level, typically what happens is the seriousness of how they take the sport is part of the reason that they're not quite as committed. So if they're not quite as committed and you're overly committed as a coach, then you're teaching the wrong audience. So what I mean by who am I coaching? It's like, okay, you could have committed kids that are just not talented, so you have to work with that. You could have non-committed kids that are talented, and then that's the issue there, is teaching them maybe some commitment or whatever. And then you could have some kids that love to play, but they're just not serious about hockey, so you can't over serious them. So you got to match them. But I think in any of those roles, try to lift them up a little bit. That's what I would say. So and then within all that shit, you can have a really, really poor team and have a really, really good player. So for example, Denny Gore, right? He played on. He was very well coached by Kenny, but he was a first round pick, eighth or 10th overall to the Owen Sound Attack, right? And he played on Chatham, and they didn't have a lot of people trying out. They had a decent team, but that player he's a first round pick in the OHL. So there is some attention that on a poor team that you might have to give them a little bit of extra here and tell them fight through things. Like, playing on not the best team might be good for you later, because if you go first round in the OHL, especially in the first 10 picks, that kind of means that team wasn't the best team last year. So you're going to be in the same type of environment. So how do you carry a team when you're a superstar, right? And then you see a kid that just works real hard, that you can see maybe some tools coming, and it's like, okay, how can I work with him to make him better? So like, who am I coaching? You have the team, and then that's why it's very, very important to pull guys aside and identify passion, talent, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's starts to play into the individuals that we mentioned at the start of the podcast. Like, there's that element too. But before maybe you touch on that a little bit, kind of what you're talking about is I learned about this. I don't remember where I learned about this actually. People say like you're in the zone. You feel like you're in the zone. That's actually, it's called the zone of proximal development, which is, I don't know if it was a psychologist.
The zone of what?
The zone of proximal development. And I forget who was the guy that came up with it or coined it or whatever. Anyways, so when people say like they feel like they're in the zone, it feels like you're in the perfect balance of something that's not too challenging where you can't do it, but not so easy that you're bored. And that's like the best place to be to learn things, whatever. And basically what you were saying if we could summarize that in one term, is you want to put your team in that zone, you know? So where's like the collective consciousness or ability at with your team, and you want to put that in that zone, right? Where it's just enough challenge for everybody, where everybody will eventually be able to understand or integrate whatever you're trying to teach, and it's not such a joke that it's boring, where it's like you're doing the same practice every week or whatever, and there's no learning happening. So you want to try to find that, and all those characteristics you outlined, that's what you're looking for to decide where that zone is. Where do I need to put my team so that they're in that zone? And then within that, going back to the individuals, maybe you have a kid that is an outlier that's way outside that zone. Either way, so you have your team here and you got a kid that's way up here. So how are you going to tailor your coaching now to keep that kid engaged and keep him learning? You still have to try to balance that situation. And then on the flip side, you got the kid that's maybe way too far behind, but you only had 18 kids try out, So how do you keep that kid engaged when it's actually too much for him, and you have to try to figure those things out. So it's important as a coach that you figure out what it is you're working with, who you're working with, and then you can kind of outline where they should be to put them in that perfect spot where they constantly feel like they're making progress, and then going to each individual kid, identifying some of their differences, and then trying to figure out where to plug them on that spectrum to make sure that they're still getting some benefit from it too. And I think all those things are possible. Like, it's not that it sounds like a lot to do as the coach, but it's actually not that difficult of a task in practice. It just takes a little bit of time, right? It just takes a little bit of commitment and conversations and talking to some of the kids to make sure you have a pulse on where everybody's at. And I think that the issue that a lot of coaches run into is they don't do that and they just dictate. It's like, this is what I think, and you guys will conform to this. We've talked about the opposite side of that from the player side. When the coach is dictating to you, you kind of have to figure out how to play within those rules, even if you don't want to. Well, now we're flipping the page onto the coach and saying that's not a great strategy. It's like you need to be able to work with the team you have.
Yeah, and if you go back 20 years and more, the dictator was the way it was. You do this but you'll hear, if you ever listen to interviews with coaches, you'll hear it very clearly. Like Mike Babcock went through that, right? Like I'm sure he did. He's a very smart guy, but he at some point became unrelatable to the players, or his message was, the tone of his words were so strong that the message wasn't getting through. And so like he said, I just listened to him talk about it. He goes, yeah, I've learned. He goes, like, kids these days, and you'll hear this in every podcast or in any interview from coaches, is like, now it's not the same as it used to be. You don't just do it because I said so with your arms crossed, eyes crossed, ears crossed. It's because kids want to know why. And that's a fair statement. And it's like, really old school guys might say, well, that's shit, but it is what it is. And it's actually more effective. Why? And if we always say it all the time, if you know why you're doing something, you're probably going to do it better. Right. So, I just looked back in school, like I would ask that question to teachers. Wasn't being a jackass, just like, Eric, Mr. Eric, what do we need to know this for? Because it's like, well, it's not really a good answer. It's not helping me because I was a why guy.
Yeah.
I was a why guy. If you tell me, oh, because Andy, it's going to help your hockey career, right? That's individual coaching now. How? Well, knowing geography. Let's say I just pulling this one out. If you don't know where Edmonton is, wouldn't you like to know where Edmonton is on the map? So when you're traveling, whatever, or when you pack your clothes to go play in Edmonton, you need a toque or whatever. Oh, okay, that would make sense to me. I got to find out where Edmonton is on the map or whatever, right? Why do I need this math? Because when you make all that money when you play hockey, you're gonna have to know where to put your savings, all that savings, so you can buy a Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I remember that my dad used this example too. He said a couple teachers, I could be blending the stories, but whatever. He said that in their math class, the one teacher would use the stats of baseball players to do math questions in class, because now a lot of him and his buddies really like baseball. So then now they're paying attention because they're talking about a baseball player that they like and batting averages or whatever, and using that to do questions. It's like, that's more interesting. That's, to your point, the individual piece of it. Or he had the music teacher where he could bring in a song that he liked and they would analyze that song, So he would bring in like Black Dog by Led Zeppelin into their music class at school. And now I'm interested in learning about this because that's a sweet song. I like that song, and those are good strategies.
Well, and it goes down to this, right? Like if you don't do stuff like that, if you just dictate, then you're not necessarily making friends.
Mhm.
You don't. I'm not saying you have to make friends, but
You want the
people,
buy-in, man. That's how you get the
yeah, and
buy-in.
and people, we say it all the time. People don't know how much don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care about them,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's very, very important to get results.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned was, like, how serious do we need to be? And I wanna highlight that again for another minute because I think, uh, like I said, and then you said, you get a lot of the everything crossed coach that I'm just Joe coach and I know everything, serious guy. And it's not that that's never appropriate, but you have to be able to read the play. So I just want to highlight that again. If you have a team of kids that they're there to have fun, and you're like military coach Joe Serious, like remember you had a consult with a dad that was talking about the coach on their team is just like he's too much. Like he I forget exactly what he said. If he yells, I don't know if he yells too much or he's too intense or something. Yeah, something like that where the guy's like just always on and the kids are young. I forget how old they were, but just whatever it was. And the guy's just like, I feel like this is not good now for the kids. Like I feel like it's not good. And even though like he in the same breath he says like he really liked the coach. He's like, I don't want to go to a new coach. Like I like this coach, but it's just too much. And so this guy here's if you take this coach now, it's like okay, his intentions are good. He's trying to do a good thing, but he's acting like they're the Red Wings. Like the expectations are too high for 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds or whatever. And there's a fine line between expecting them to listen and follow instructions and it's like they're 8. Like they're gonna mess up everything. Like,
Well,
and understanding
they're
the
gonna make
audience, right?
mistakes.
So
Yeah.
it's important that you're not too serious
Yeah. Well, we have
on that.
another example of that is we had the one guy here. He was talking to me, and he thinks he's Joe Coach, and he's coaching an A level 18U, 18U. And I know the two, three best players on the team. The best player on that team does not care about hockey. He just wants to play. That's the point. That he just wants to play. And there's nobody on this team that's going anywhere. Not a chance. And they don't want to. They're playing for fun. And this guy is like Joe serious about and it's see here's the fine line. It's okay to be Joe serious about like if this is your philosophy that when right now I'm the coach that if you're going to do something well or if you're going to do something you're going to do it well. If we're going to play hockey we're going to play it the right way. We're going to have work ethic. You can't be late. All those kind of things. That's fine. That's fine. But his is about his approach is he's coming across like you guys if you don't listen to me you're not going anywhere. Well, you have lost them and they tell me they say it's just such a joke. Guy's an idiot because they don't articulate like that but they're like just want to have fun.
Yeah, I don't care
Oh,
about
you got
going
to warm
anywhere.
up at this exact time. It's like you don't understand your audience. You got kids that are coming in they if they can get here 5 minutes get dressed and go to the game that's what they want to do. But this guy wants the proper warm up this that the other thing but he's approaching it like you aren't going to be a hockey player without my help. And you're not going anywhere if you don't start doing this. You need to take this seriously. But that's the wrong audience. That's the wrong audience. You need to be coaching U15, U16, U18, whatever, triple A or private academy or something like that, where people are like, I want to be a hockey player. But the message from the kids are like, I don't care. And we have too many practices and all that kind of stuff. It's like, so that's what I'm saying is who am I coaching? Because you could be like that guy could let's say he is an actual really good coach x's and o's and can win and stuff they don't care just put me on the line we know who the best guys are just put us out
And